This is Grafted Together with ACSI Chief Ministry Officer Jerry Nelson.
So one of my earliest memories on my leadership journey was as a high school sophomore coaching youth baseball. And after one practice, a deacon of our church, who had been watching my practices, stopped me. He placed his hand on my shoulder and said, "Jerry, remember Jesus had disciples." He was not admonishing me for how I was coaching the kids. He was concerned that I was trying to do it all by myself. And while it has been hard for me to break that get it done regardless of the circumstances attitude, I've also learned and observed that true sustainability of anything that's worthwhile, any worthwhile venture, is dependent on the available capacity to fulfill it. In John Maxwell's 17 indisputable laws of teamwork, he lists the law of significance as law number 1, which states that 1 is too small a number to achieve greatness. In the introduction to the book, he challenges the Lone Ranger myth. He says, as much as we admire solo achievement, the truth is that no lone individual has done anything of value. Nothing of significance was ever achieved by an individual acting alone. Individuals play the game, but teams win championships. And if you do everything alone and never partner with other people, you create huge barriers to your own potential. It takes a team to do anything of lasting value, end quote. In our desire to serve the Lord and be faithful, we may inadvertently come to believe that we are doing this all by ourselves. This may be the case for some seasons, but not all. This is an exception and not the rule. Paul reminds believers in Ephesus, Rome, and Corinth that the Lord has given gifts to believers to work together for the good of the Lord in the same way that a body works together to serve the purpose of the head. The eye cannot say to the foot, "I don't need you," and vice versa. No one part can do it all by themselves. Spiritual formation is a big task. It's a God-sized task, and one that doesn't depend on or rest solely on one individual in one department. So how does someone who has been charged with the role of directing spiritual formation in an institution build a team and empower people in such a way to sustain this mission and realize the vision of transformation? How does a leader build in such a way that the mission and growth continues beyond themselves? It is not an easy task, but it can be done. Are you a spiritual formation Lone Ranger, or do you know one? Then I recommend you join the Spiritual Formation Network to connect with leaders from around the world who understand the value of collaboration and teamwork, who have rejected the Lone Ranger myth and decided to walk together in community. We especially feel the value of community when hard times come. So I encourage you to join us on April 28th when Dr. Milton Gonzalez, Executive Director at Covenant Christian Academy in McAllen, Texas, will join us to walk us through the last phase of our spiritual formation journey map on how to equip teachers and leaders to prepare for and respond to crisis. To gain access to past meeting recordings, be sure to join the Spiritual Formation Community Group, and to register for the Spiritual Formation Network meeting, you can sign up at acsi.org/convene. That is acsi.org/CONVENE, and look for Spiritual Formation Network. Get registered today to connect with spiritual formation ambassadors from around the world and receive regular updates on upcoming training and networking opportunities, as well as related resources. Again, that is acsi.org/convene. Joining me today to discuss strategies on building team and capacity for spiritual formation initiatives is Dr. David Brinkley. David is the Director of Spiritual Life at Rosslyn Academy, a Christian international school in Nairobi, serving about 700 students from over 50 nations. Previously at Rosslyn, he taught Bible to 11th and 12th graders and served as department chair for 7 years. He holds a Doctor of Ministry from Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary and a Master's of Divinity and Theological Masters from Liberty Baptist Theological Seminary. David also serves on the pastoral team at International Christian Fellowship in Nairobi. And before moving to Kenya, he spent 17 years in youth ministry and 5 in Christian education. His wife, Beth, is a kindergarten teacher at Rosslyn, and they have been married for 30 years. Congrats, David. I mean,
Thank
that's
you.
that's they have two sons, Noah, who's 26, and I got to get this right. Is it Cleaver or Clever?
It's clever.
Clever. I love it. That's very clever. Who's 24. David, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah. Well, we were just talking about how hot it was and how hot it is in Nairobi, which when I visited, man, the weather was absolutely gorgeous. So again, thank you for turning on the AC while I was up there. And if I have an opportunity to come back, please keep it on. Welcome
Yeah.
again, David.
Thanks a lot. So glad to be here.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your journey in Christian education and how you came to your current role at Rosslyn Academy.
Yeah. Thanks for asking. Yeah. So I actually was a public school kid. My wife was all Christian education. I'll get to her in a minute, but I didn't become a Christian until college, and so I was really involved with Campus Crusade for Christ and a lot of missions and discipleship. And but I was knew I was going to teach. I'm a social study teacher by trade, and actually, it's hard to believe in the climate we're in. But when I got out of college, I didn't get a job. There were too many teachers and not enough positions. That's kind of opposite of today. I think you would agree. Anyway, so a year later, I got a call from a ministry friend and said, "Hey, there's a guy here from Dade Christian School. It's in northern Dade County." And sure enough, just kind of jumped in and went there, met my wife. And so we were involved in Christian education in two places there in North Carolina for about 6 years. And then, as you mentioned, I went into youth ministry for quite some time. Beth fluctuated back and forth, but really our call here to Roslyn was really missional in some ways. We had a missionary friend here, and the opportunity came to come to Roslyn and teach and kind of influence the culture here. And we kind of did it later in life. I mean, we were, close to 50 before we kind of stepped out of
Mhm.
that shell of the U.S. But yeah, and I think for me, the real pull is just for when I was in high school 40 years ago, and people being in high school today is a totally different world. And
Mhm.
so, just for the opportunity to be in Christian education, where students are learning about how God operates in the world, in a world that a lot of times doesn't want to operate according to His principles, has been a
Mhm.
real motivator for us. And my wife has really flourished here, really, from her background. So yeah, that's kind of my story. Some Christian education and then youth ministry for a long time. Then God brought us here, and we really enjoy it.
We've been as we've continued to expand our network and we've gotten to know literally people from around the world. We really have seen this wonderful trend of folks who have spent time in ministry moving into the Christian school. They really see it in this paradigm as an opportunity to have even greater influence because you're spending more time with the kids. So obviously, you're able to see the connection, but the differences between how things operate, in the States and how things operate,
Yeah,
outside of the States. But, many of our listeners may have heard of international schools and their perception of international schools is, well, international school is a school that's not here in the country and I
right.
live in. But international schools have a particular distinction. So can you help paint a picture for our listeners of what is an international school? And what are some distinct features of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. We are almost 80 years old. It's hard to believe. And for the first 50 years, we were primarily a mission school that began in Tanzania and moved here from weather reasons. But in the last 30 years, the board made some decisions about who was going to come to our school. And so it began with local international students. Today, we serve, as you mentioned, students from over 50 countries, mission students, diplomatic students. We are right down the road from the UN and the U.S. Embassy. There are tons of those students and families looking for good quality education, many of them from a Christian perspective. And then we also have really tapped in the last 10 years into the kind of the business community.
Mhm.
We have a large Kenyan population of students who come. So we're really just international. And even our staff is not just American expats. We have staff from Europe and Canada, um, Latin America. So even our staff represents kind of that diversity. And so it's a very diverse place. And we're serving students with quality education, but we're definitely do it from a Christian perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you kind of mentioning diversity. You know, I had an opportunity to experience that firsthand. I mean, especially when you're talking about folks from it's not just the different ethnicities, the different nationalities. When you're talking about diplomatic
Hmm.
communities, you're talking about the business community. You're also serving people from different socioeconomic,
Right.
standings, and again, it presents its own unique challenges. Especially in the area of spiritual formation. And so, within that, what are some, as it relates to spiritual formation, what are some unique spiritual formation, opportunities and blessings that have come, really working in this context?
Yeah, I think a lot of our opportunities actually can sometimes also be our challenges, right? And so we found that, we have just we're a missional school, so about 80% of our student body comes from a Christian background, and the other 20% don't. So that creates an awesome opportunity. I can list students in the last 8 years who came here with no faith or another faith and no background, and God's brought them to Christ. And so
Mhm.
that's a great opportunity because we almost, in some sense, have a small mission field here.
Mhm.
And so that's an awesome opportunity. And I think the other opportunity is for our students to see the diversity of worship. Um,
Mhm.
when I was in early Christian education, I tended to be at schools that were very church centric, right? The church had the school, and so you were like whatever denomination that might serve. And
Yeah.
so we face a place that has people with different spiritual expressions, right? So, and
Mhm.
that's an awesome opportunity for students to sit in a class or to sit in chapel, and we try to do that as part of our spiritual formation for people to be exposed to multiple ways of worship. And
Mhm.
so I think that's a great opportunity to see the diversity in the body of Christ, um, and how from people coming from different places worship differently. And so that can also be a challenge. About 8 years ago, we came up, the board directed us to come up with some core tenets that our faculty sign and actually our student body signs.
Mhm.
And those have been really helpful because we try to major on the major things about the gospel and not
Mhm.
necessarily all the secondary things. Even though we're happy to have those conversations. So
Right.
I think it's really cool to be in a place where people can experience God in multiple ways because students and even faculty are bringing that background here. The challenge of that obviously is sometimes people are used to what they're used to. And so, but yeah, it's been great for me, even kind of coming from a specific denominational influence to kind of be
Mhm.
here and experience that in a different way. So, lots of opportunities for those conversations to be had and for people to think about there's not just one way to follow Jesus. And I think that's been
Mhm.
very, very good for us.
Yeah, someone who I've befriended recently wrote a book. It's the book is titled "Race and Grace," and what he's really outlining is the value of multi-ethnic church, like being intentional about that, being intentional about um, in this present paradigm, really experiencing what it's going to be like,
In heaven, yeah.
when we all get to heaven, right?
Right.
It's not going to be one denomination. It's not going to be one style of worship. It's really going to be every tribe, tongue, and nation really experiencing just the vast diversity of expressions of faith in
Right.
Jesus Christ, right? All unified under,
Right.
the all unified underneath the blood. I want to kind of go back a little bit, something you said, and about the missions aspect, that you're a missional school. I know many of our schools, here in the States, there's this ongoing conversation about what does spiritual formation look like in a covenant school? What does it look like in a missional school? There's a movement of folks wanting to talk more about, all right, we want to open up our doors, but
Right.
we have to still at the same time maintain our core values.
Right.
And knowing that over Roslyn's 80-year history, there's had to be some shifts that have
Yeah.
gone in. And just from your perspective, what have you put in place? What have you seen that at least strikes the right balance of, hey, we want to invite folks who don't have any faith in Jesus Christ into the
Yeah.
school, knowing that there's going to be a significant effect on the student body,
Yeah.
but recognizing that that's one of the best ways that you have. They're coming to you to
Right.
share the gospel. What
Yeah.
what have you done to, again, make sure you maintain your core values
Right.
without just opening it up to anyone?
That's a great question. I think the core tenets are where we would start. If you're a staff member, you're going to sign those. But actually, parents agree to those. They don't necessarily have to agree with those, but they
Hmm.
have to not go against those. And
Yeah.
so, and I think a lot of parents in our area like Rosin for two reasons. One is our academic, we're strong academically, but
Hmm.
also just we hold a moral value that some other schools don't. We're an American system. Around us is mainly British system. So if you're
Hmm.
looking for an American system, especially on this side of town, that your choices are a little bit limited, and so that's helped us a little bit. But the core tenets really guide us. We require students, for example, to go to chapel. They have to take Bible class every year, and they're
Hmm.
aware of this. I also think it means that there are some limits. Like we said, we're an international school. We actually have limits on local student admissions, for example, so that each class is capped at a certain number so that we don't affect that international population. We
Hmm.
make it as balanced as possible. So, because that's who we're here for. Um,
Yes.
so I think that those balances in terms of admissions is helpful. Um, but really, and we do a high school survey every year. This comes from data from our high school survey, but really between 80 and 85%, that's been consistent for the last since I've been here eight
Hmm.
years. I think the survey's been in existence for 10 years or
Hmm.
11. And so we're doing a good job of not making it 60-40 or 50-50, where then that really affects your culture. There are probably other schools that could do that, but for us, that's kind of the balance we found.
Hmm.
And so that's been really helpful for us to not lose maybe that culture, but still allow people to come who might not have a Christian faith to begin with.
Yeah, so I mean, what I'm hearing is at least there's clarity from the top down, right?
Yes.
Of what it is that you believe, why you're here, and you're using that to help make decisions about,
Correct.
the who gets admitted into the school, the programmatic, elements, and that seems to be the thing that's keeping you on track, and so you don't lose
Correct.
sight of, why God has called Rosalind to, Nairobi, in Kenya, in that time. And I also like the fact that you do a survey, which, you've been engaged in our network of just really trying to take that snapshot of where you are
Right.
against those core tenets to make sure that you're staying on target of hitting your goals and fulfilling your mission. Yeah,
Yeah, it's been a really good tool for us to examine things we've changed and how that's affected things. So yeah, we think it's a positive
yeah,
thing. We probably could expand it more, whether that's middle school students or elementary, but right now we focus on the high school data primarily.
yeah. When I visited, in our many conversations, while I was visiting last October, one of the things that really intrigued me was the how you set up things at Roslyn to really, I would say, shepherd each aspect of the school, especially the call to really steward the spiritual formation of Rosslyn Academy. You have a chaplaincy program, or you have chaplains over particular departments. So talk about that program. Talk about how it's structured, and then I'd also love for our listeners to hear about the origins of that.
Yeah, it's great. So I'm the director of spiritual life, and over me I have four chaplains. There's an elementary chaplain, and that position went from like 20% 6 years ago to 100% now.
Wow.
Um, and so she's totally dedicated to to spiritual development on the elementary campus. And elementary campus is a lot different than the middle school and high school campus in various ways. And then we have two middle school, high school chaplains. They sort of serve in both places. It's a male and a female, which has really been great. Even though one person kind of leans one way or the other. And then we also have an operations team, which is about 120 people. And we have a chaplain over that area. So that's all our like drivers and workers. And I meet with him weekly. Just met with him today. He's doing an outstanding job just of caring for them as well. And so, and he's involved with regular devotions, for example. So that's kind of the structure. And it's been really helpful. When I came in 2018, we only had one high school chaplain, and then we had like a 20% elementary chaplain. And
Hmm.
so part of that shift happened just because of our size. From the 2010 to 2018 to 2020, we grew quite a bit in the number of students we were servicing, and it just didn't we couldn't operate out of the same model.
Yeah.
Um, and I think secondly, especially in the middle school and high school, it gives people an opportunity, as you mentioned, operate out of their gifting. So, for example, worship is a big part of our worship team. We have worship teams, student-led worship teams that are led by staff, both in the middle school and high school. And so, if your chaplain is not good at worship and you only have one, you get kind of you get stuck, right? And so, one of
Yeah.
our chaplains leads that area, whereas our other chaplain's able to use his gifts in a different way. So that teamwork has been really helpful. It was a very kind of a wise decision we made. I think it's been 4.5 years since we had that shift, and that's brought a lot of positive benefits. And
Hmm.
likewise in the elementary school, it was kind of a person just doing chapel, but now we've developed. We can talk about discipleship in a minute, kind of how we develop some spiritual
Yeah.
formation pathways from elementary up through high school. And so, yeah, that shift really happened because of size. Another thing that happened was in terms of my position. My position is only 8 years old, and so and it was needed for size, but also just as I talked about kind of our makeup missionally, just for clarity for the staff and the students about what we believe as a school. And
Hmm.
so that nobody had that responsibility really. I guess it held on the superintendent, but his hands are full with other things. And so it was a wise move to create that position. So we've gone from just one high school chaplain and a part-time chaplain in spiritual life to now myself with four other chaplains. So it's worked really well, and God's been great in the people He's brought to serve here at Rosslyn.
For many schools, it seems like, man, that's really a heavy lift, and it just seems like that's a huge financial commitment,
Right.
and especially in the American system, I can see someone saying, man, that's a huge commitment of dollars
Right.
to, full-time positions. I'm curious in you guys' deliberation and decision to create this position. What was the thought? What was the conversation, especially around the money aspect?
Yeah, I think what helped us in that phase was that we were really healthy and growing, um,
Mhm.
and so we were able to kind of absorb that in a way. And I think the second thing was a commitment to spiritual formation and a recognition that it wasn't really happening like we wanted it to happen. And
Mm.
so when I was here the first 2 years, uh, the high school I would say would be spiritually numb, is how I would describe it. So they heard the same things, but there was just not a lot of student-led leadership. There wasn't a lot of there was a few pockets of discipleship. And when we hired our Simeon, who's our high school chaplain, one of his directives was to help us with spiritual formation. And so that position is totally transformed how what we've done. And so if
Wow.
that's one of our goals as a school, we needed to invest
Mm.
financially in that area. And you're always making choices, what's the best thing. But for us, we needed to get stronger from that standpoint. And to have someone dedicated to that has been really helpful for us as a whole school, I think.
Well, the scriptures are pretty clear, where your heart is, your money will be also. And so, my granddad had a saying. He says, if it's mind over matter, he's like, if you don't mind, it doesn't matter.
It's good.
And it again, kind of, I'm not trying to beat up our American context, but we know what's true. Our athletic departments, our fine arts departments, they get a lot of attention, they get a lot of resources, and we understand the value of those things. But I think if you cornered any Christian school leader and you asked them to rank the importance of investing in the souls of students, I think they would say, "Oh yeah, that's at the top." But if you go and look at the commitment that they've made in their budget line items,
Right.
sometimes it doesn't always match. And so, clearly, you guys are at Rosslyn, over the last few years, you've gained clarity on those core tenets. You're taking snapshots of where you are. There has been a commitment of resources to invest in, really the most valuable thing, right? What does it profit a man
Right.
to gain the world and lose his soul in the process? And so you've committed some resources. So you mentioned also about the spiritual formation plan that you've developed from the elementary all the way through. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think the biggest word I'd use is opportunity.
Mhm.
We've tried to create multiple opportunities or windows for students to have discipleship. And so this started with kind of high school and middle school doing early morning discipleship groups one morning a week, which has been about 3 years old. And what's interesting is that led our elementary chaplain now does fourth and fifth grade discipleship during lunch. These are all
Mhm.
voluntary programs, but it's structured during lunch with the help of staff and some parents. And actually, our elementary um, discipleship is co-led by high school students. So they take
Mhm.
their lunch break once a week. And so I think opportunity, where are places kids can commit? Some kids won't come in the morning, so then we have like a guys and a girls group that meets twice monthly on a during lunch on Friday to talk about important things, and staff help to facilitate that. But what I've really appreciated is we're not just sitting down and telling kids what to think,
Yeah.
but we're letting them participate in that, whether it's questions, whether it's leadership. About 4 years ago, we started what's called Friday Night Fellowship. Youth ministry in Nairobi is unique because of the way churches are sometimes structured. Your youth groups and some, especially mainly Kenyan churches, could go up till you're 25 years old or something. It's just a little bit
Okay.
different than the States context. And so we had a teacher that kind of helped launch this Friday Night Fellowship. So it's more like a youth group feel. And so I'm helping with that this year. It's totally student led. We just kind of guide them. And so they do
Mhm.
a game, they do fellowship time, they do worship, they invite the speaker. Sometimes they do the speaking and testimonies. And so I would say our plan is we're looking for multiple ways for students to be involved. I mentioned worship teams. So some people are using their gifts in that way. We have a spiritual life committee that feeds into the high school chapel time, so they give some input. So all those are just it's more ways to onboard than just one route. And I think that's been very helpful for our school because we're touching kids where they're at. And so kids are
Yeah.
in different places and um, that's been a benefit for us because we've seen more people participate in some way, even if it isn't, let's say, the main way, which we would consider maybe discipleship groups. And
Yeah.
so I think that strategy has allowed more students to feel ownership of their own spiritual walk, rather than saying, well, I can't get there Tuesday morning or that doesn't fit my schedule, so then I'm just kind of left out.
Yeah. And that obviously requires, and it sounds like you have a pretty good handle on, for lack of a better phrase, the spirit of the students at Roslyn, and you understand the terrain that you're working with, and you're, as the saying goes, you're not trying to use a hammer to drive
Right.
a screw,
Yep.
but you're really meeting them where they are. And I mean, when you really look at the life of Jesus, and I'm thinking particularly the book of John. When he conversed with the Pharisees, it was definitely scripture, right?
Right.
He was, especially the Pharisees who he was pretty harsh with them. He was pretty straightforward. But for those teachers of the law who really were inquisitive, he still used the law, but there was he met them where they were. I'm thinking about the uh, um, I'm drawing a blank, but I'm thinking about the rich young ruler. Like he
Right,
there was a graciousness in which he dealt with the rich young ruler, but a gracious sternness at the same time.
right,
People who needed healing, he met them where they were. The woman at the well, he went to her. He
right.
went out of his way, and so I think that is something, I at least I'm thinking about for our spiritual life directors out there who might be struggling with, engagement. It's like, are you creating enough natural opportunities
Right.
or a variety of engagement opportunities for your students to really connect with the main objective, which is them really developing faith in Christ.
Yeah, and I would say you mentioned this earlier. We have a lot of staff involved. It's not just the chaplains leading that, so we have a lot of
Mm,
staff involved, and so some of that's who we hire, and you can get a sense for. I mean, not every person's going to be a discipleship leader, but we have a lot of staff who are involved, invested in the life of students.
mm,
And it's interesting. We'll have some kids occasionally transfer international schools from another school. Maybe a kid who's in the embassy and he's at this sister school or this other school. And one of the things they'll always comment on is just the value of how kids feel valued by their teachers. Um,
mm,
and so I coached a kid, and he was at a different international school that wasn't Christian, very high academic standard. He comes to
mm,
Rosslyn after 1 year, and he just noticed, hey, these people care for me beyond just
mm,
I'm just not a number. They care for me, and so I think the teamwork is really helpful for us staff. And then invested parents, we have mission parents and other parents who come alongside us as well. It's not all just staff, but it's helpful to have people with that kind of a heart because
mm.
then they're open to serving in those opportunities in addition to their job as whatever they're teaching.
And so a part of those the core tenets, we didn't get into each of the parts, and we don't have to, but it's a part of the core tenet and expectation for the teachers to really value the discipleship process, or what's in there that really challenges
Tennis
them.
is more just kind of basic Christian beliefs. We believe these things together
I
about who
gotcha.
Christ is and who the church is, etc. But when teachers come, they're supposed to be actively involved in a local church, and
Hmm.
so a lot of those teachers that could be where they're serving, and then we still have teachers who serve in a local church here.
Hmm.
But I think that heart of discipleship is a that's going to come up in conversations. I just had interviews a few weeks ago. We hired a couple and just asking them those questions about where's your heart at? What are you doing with
Yeah.
students? So you get a feel for that just in that process of hiring. So there's not an expectation that they all disciple, but I think growing in your relationship with Christ. And if a person's growing their relationship with Christ, I mean, if they're, think of John 15 Christian, if I'm walking with God and I'm in the vine,
Yeah.
there's going to be that fruit and desire to be involved where my gifting is. And so
Yeah.
we're fortunate to have many staff who are doing that and doing it well. And that makes even our chaplain's job, I would say, easier because they
Yeah.
don't feel like they're carrying the load by themselves.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the main points. It's everyone involved, even though certain people are directing certain things,
Right.
but everyone has to own that responsibility to do what Christ has called each of us to do. And I like that and again, it's not a mandate, but at least you understand what God has called Rosalind to do, and you're doing everything that you can to ask those questions up front for those folks who are seeking employment at Roslyn, whether they have the same heart and whether they really align with the mission and desires. Well, I want to pivot to the students of this generation. And again, as you said, you've been in Christian ed for a long time, and Beth has been in Christian ed for a long time, and you guys have seen a thing or two on in the States and in an international
Yep.
context. But what are you seeing? What are some things that are just really giving you hope about this generation of students?
I, I find students are captured by service would be one thing. I just find students want to help. Like
Mm,
they see a need and they want to. Like a lot of times, I mean, when we were kids, people were like, "Oh, those kids are terrible. They're not going to make up anything." And then the next generation, but these students really care about causes and people.
Yeah.
So when they see something that they feel is not right, I think they're willing to step in and do that. This isn't really a part of our spiritual formation, but we have a service learning coordinator, and so we have students involved in clubs that are about service as well. And so
Mhm.
I just see that as a big plus for this generation. Um, I think that they're ready to serve and care. Um,
Mhm.
Maybe sometimes they're not understanding what's the best way to help in those situations, like because they're young and don't have experience, but they're willing to do that. I think that's a big, and I think the second thing is they're fairly authentic. I think if you're fake in front of
Mhm.
them, they'll pick it up pretty
The
quick. They
radar
know
is
when you're
on.
playing the game and when you're not playing the game. Probably because they sometimes do play the game as well, but they recognize that, and I think that's positive. Um, they want people to be live authentically in front of them. And when they see you doing the same thing in front of them, privately or in another situation that you would do in front of them, that confirms their understanding of faith. Obviously, if it's the other thing, they might be discouraged or like what's
Mhm.
going on. So I think those two things are really big for them: service and authenticity. They want to see people living, even if they're going to struggle with that themselves, they want to see people living that out
Yeah.
well.
That confirms what Barner found in their open generation report a couple of years ago that 24%. So it was 21% Jesus committed, 8% Bible engaged, and 24% justice oriented.
Hmm.
That it is, yeah, there's a high degree with this generation that really want to do something of significance. But of course, that biblical literacy part is really where the challenge is. And so that
Right.
that just kind of tells us that this generation is susceptible to doing service in a way that not may not be in accordance with
Correct.
how Jesus did service. They like Jesus, they're open to Jesus,
Yeah.
but they have basically a caricature of who Jesus is, and they haven't really engaged with Scripture. Are you finding that same thing with the
Yeah.
students?
Actually, in our CRE, I just had a conversation with our CRE department chair, and she teaches middle school, and we had a conversation, and she's excellent. She's just like very good on the big picture of God and themes within the Bible. And she said she's just found that students are coming in. Even from Christian families, they don't know where the books, I mean, just all kinds of biblical literary issues.
Yeah.
So she's actually rethinking, like, do I need to do something different? Even though we've tried to focus in elementary school on kind of the basics of the story of the Bible and characters of the Bible and all those things, she's really finding that the students don't really know, even Christian students don't really aren't aware, at least as she's meeting them in middle school. And so she's even rethinking that. So I think we see that quite a bit. And some of that's okay because you're just developing, right?
Yeah.
But it is different than it was even when I started at Rosslyn for students coming in,
Mhm.
even from a Christian background, just an unawareness of what the Bible says about certain
Yeah.
things.
And I guess if we really look at it, I mean, one people would say, man, this is a crisis of epic proportion, and saying, yeah, maybe, but I think there's a reason why Barner called this generation the open generation, because there's an opportunity
Right,
to this generation. I think is ready to be discipled. They're
right,
ready to be shaped. And I'm just thinking through the report. It says they like Jesus, but they have they have some issues with people who say they follow Jesus. To
right,
your
right.
point. And so perhaps instead of us lamenting the fact that these kids don't know anything, it's like, no, let's take this as an opportunity
Right.
to really pour into them deeply, and create those opportunities, and really create the space for these students
Yeah,
to
that's
get to
good.
know the real Jesus.
Yeah, I mentioned one other thing that I think we're trying to do a little bit, and that's seeing spiritual formation in the classroom. Um, yeah, probably the last 5 years, one of our focuses in faculty formation has been biblical integration,
Hmm.
using kind of the four themes of the Bible, or
Yeah.
worldview questions. But I just recently had a conversation with our English teacher, and he's actually walking through with his class, how do you have a when two Christians have a disagreements on something, how do you have those conversations?
Mm,
And it's just been fascinating. I'm actually going in his class on Monday morning to kind of partake in that, but just setting the stage for what it means to really understand someone else that might be different from you and then look into the truth. And so that can happen in discipleship groups and in some of these other settings, but it also can happen in the classroom. And so is that happening in every classroom all the time at Rosslyn? Well, probably not, but it's good to see people thinking through that and helping students answer really hard questions and maybe change their mind about something.
yeah,
And so I think there's a place for that as well. That God's if all truth's God's truth, we should be doing that as well as we teach, whether it's history, language arts, math, whatever. And so that's fun to see when it happens as well. And I think there's an avenue for spiritual formation in those situations as well.
absolutely. Well, David, before we get out of here, we've again, it's one of the great privileges I've had in this season at ACSI is just really to see what God is doing around the world, and it's I talk with my teammates at ACSI, and it's like God has given me this opportunity to see how He's moving, and
Right.
it's like and also to just kind of bring our spiritual life directors together because sometimes these positions can feel very lonely,
Right.
and like I said, I've met very few spiritual life directors who've been in their position for over a decade. I actually I can't think of one specifically. Maybe they've been in and around the role. Maybe they've been serving in some type of capacity in the role, maybe part time, but very few are have been tasked full time with this
Right.
role. So, what encouragement would you have for people who are doing this full time, people who are doing it part time, or people who are just starting out, just like, man,
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm just following the lead of the Lord.
Yeah, I think the first thing is you have to start where you are. Like I think sometimes we look, oh, I want, my end goals, this is what I'd really like to see at my school. And you need to have that vision, but you've got to start where you are. And so sometimes we get discouraged when we're not starting where we are. And so everybody's context different. If you're part-time and you're doing it 40% of the time, then you start where you are. If you're new to the school, you start where you are. And so I think that's one big helpful thing. What's one thing I can do this semester that would help our spiritual formation? And then the second thing I think is you've touched on and is just you've got to find a team to be involved with that. There's got to be some. I'm assuming that even if you're in a role like that, part-time, full-time, there's got to be some like-minded people on your campus who want to be a part of that. And so you need to tap into them and use their gifts and talents, and we're all different. And so some kids, I remember even back in my youth ministry days, I'd try to have a big team and kids would stand up when they graduated, and they would thank people. And half the time they never thank me. They're thanking their Sunday school teacher or their somebody else. And that's what it should be like, right? So I think
That's good.
who in your school loves Jesus and wants to see kids grow in their relationship with
Mhm.
Christ, and you just bring them along. Sometimes that's one at a time, sometimes that's two at a time. And
Yeah,
I think if you start that way, you'll be encouraged. I think if you have your vision and you're always looking down like we're never going to make it, then I think you'd be discouraged. So those would be
yeah.
two things I would really encourage. I've enjoyed the Spiritual Life Network. I don't know if people have done that. That's been good. If I miss it, I still go back and watch the video. Sometimes the time frame's a little different for me,
Hmm.
but I think that's a great thing that helps people connect. And I think you guys are doing a great job with that. And I would encourage people to be a part of that because they're having these healthy conversations. And when you're breaking out and having conversations during those meetings, it's just really helpful to hear what other people are doing.
Absolutely. We do this together, right?
Right. Right.
ACSI's tagline is strong and together, and we found that very thing, David. Just spiritual life directors being encouraged. So the theme for today is don't be a lone ranger. Spiritual life director, get in
Yep.
community. David, thank you so much for your time, and man, blessings, and may God continue to bless you at Roslyn.
Thanks. I so appreciate it.
All right, and keep the AC on.
Yes, I will.
All right, appreciate you.
Grafted Together is a presentation of the Association of Christian Schools International. Learn more about biblical worldview and spiritual formation at acsi.org/graftedtogether.